Oh, baby. Welcome back to another fun, vivacious, and lively episode of OC and TJ. It's your boy. You know the name down below. It's OC. We're back for another recap, another picks episode. We're into week 11. We're pretty much in November already, and we're only a few weeks away from December. And you know what? I'm here for it, and I'm extremely excited. The Patriots won. We pretty much humiliated the Bears. Drake May is proving to be a better rookie right now than Caleb Williams, and I'm going to get into it in just a few minutes. But for now, let's just jump right into the episode. Beginning with Thursday Night Football between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders. It's the first time that these two will go up against each other this season, but it is not the first time that these two will be going up against division rivals. But one is coming off a very dominant win. The other is coming off a pretty gut-wrenching loss. Let's start with the former and go into the Philadelphia Eagles with their 34-6 victory over the Dallas Cowboys. That was pretty close at halftime. You know, they were only up by 8. Jalen Hurts got sacked 5 times. Micah Parsons made his return to the field. He had a couple takedowns each. And they turned the ball over twice with the interception and a lost fumble. But the reason why the Eagles were able to stay ahead for as long as they did is because Dallas failed to convert any of their opportunities into touchdowns. Really, it was like Cooper Kupp, or my gosh, I can't even say it. It was really like Cooper Rush missing CeeDee Lamb in the end zone, just completely blinding and laughable. But you know what? In the second half, they ran all over Philadelphia. They ran all over the Dallas Cowboys. If I can pull up my notes here for a second. Saquon Barkley, he had 66 yards. Jalen Hurts had 56 yards with 2 rushing touchdowns, along with 2 through the air. Heck, even Kenneth Gainwell and Will Shipley had big days. I think they ran for about 187 yards, if I'm not mistaken. And really, they didn't have to play hero ball that much. Yeah, A.J. Brown had a big 100-plus yard day on just 5 catches. But at the same time, that Dallas Cowboys offense was flat out atrocious. And I want to give credit to the Philadelphia Eagles defense because they did what they were supposed to do. They handled their business. But Cooper Rush, 45 passing yards on 13 completions. They turned the ball over 5 times. They picked up just 11 first downs, 3 of them in the second half, 3 for 14 on third down, and just 146 yards of offense. And in the second half, they just looked flat out dead. They couldn't move the ball whatsoever. Zeke Elliott fumbled the football. CeeDee Lamb, he was hardly utilized at all. Jake Ferguson coughed the ball up. And it was so bad that Cooper Rush got benched for Trey Lance, who only threw for 21 yards and an interception in double coverage. So it was as boring and lifeless of a game as I've seen for the Dallas Cowboys. But from the Eagles, it's definitely a huge win on their part because not only is it the first time that they were able to beat the Cowboys in Jerry World since 2017, but at the same time, with Washington's loss, the Eagles are now in first place in the NFC East. So this makes this game even more intriguing than what it was at the beginning of the year. Washington is coming off a heartbreaking 28-27 defeat to the Pittsburgh Steelers. But if we're being quite frank here, the Commanders just fell flat at the worst possible time. They got off to a great start. They were up 24-14 in the third quarter. They took advantage of a fake punt or a failed fake punt at the 16-yard line. But, Olamide Zaccheaus muffed a punt, and the defense gave up 2 early touchdowns. So Washington was only up by 3 heading into the break. But after they gashed the Pittsburgh Steelers in just 2 minutes on the opening drive of the second half, just 1 quarter after they went on a 94-yard touchdown drive to end the first half, it looked like, okay, Washington's in cruise control. As long as their offense got at least a few more points on the board and got at least 2 critical stops, they were going to be in perfect shape to win the game. Well, Washington's defense was able to force a couple turnovers. They picked off Russell Wilson once. They forced a fumble at the 1-yard line from Jaylen Warren. But Washington failed to capitalize on those opportunities. Their defense gave up a touchdown in the third quarter and they made it a 3-point game. And the best that Washington had to offer throughout that rest of that stretch was 3 points. When the Steelers turned the ball over and gave to the Commanders a chance to pull it away, the Washington Commanders punted both times. And all hell broke loose when Mike Williams broke free down the sideline for a huge 32-yard touchdown to give Pittsburgh the lead. And when Jaden Daniels was in position to win, they failed to cross midfield, and Zach Ertz was touched just short of the first down marker. But, that allowed the Steelers to force Washington to burn all their timeouts. But they faced a huge fourth down play, and they kept the offense on the field. And all Washington had to do was not jump off sides, and because Russell Wilson was going to hard count them. And lo and behold, the minute that Russell Wilson screamed the word HUD, the rookie Johnny Noonan jumped off sides. It pretty much allowed the Steelers to get the first down. And without any timeouts, Pittsburgh, all they had to do was just nail on the football. So this was a pretty stinging loss for Washington, and it's not the first time that we've seen this happen. I mean, we saw it in Week 1 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when their defense gave up 4 touchdowns to Baker Mayfield. We saw it against Baltimore when their offense did whatever they could to win, but their defense couldn't get a stop, and their offense settled for field goals when they needed touchdowns. So, honestly and unfortunately, I mean, this is kind of the MO that we've gotten from the Washington Commanders. When they have to go up against teams that are not really good or not competing for a playoff spot, Washington looks exemplary. The only exception was against the Arizona Cardinals in Week 4. But really, when it comes to teams that are in their class, they fail to live up to the hype, and they struggle, and they always have to play keep up instead of playing for the lead. So this is a huge game for Washington, because if they can't win this game at Lincoln Financial Field, then, I mean, the best they can hope for is a wild card spot. So let's get into this preview. I think the Eagles are going to win, not only because they're at home, but I think they can run the ball a lot better. I think, listen, we know that Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels are going to do everything they can, but at the same time, I think that if Washington can't run the football, then I don't know how successful Jaden Daniels is going to be throwing the football. Not that I don't have any faith in him, because we know how great he's been this year, and he's an easy candidate for Offensive Rookie of the Year. But if they can't run the football, what is Jaden Daniels going to do when he realizes that he is the only thing that can drive this team to victory? Because we know the defense, as decent as it's been all season, it's prone to giving up some fantastic performances. We saw that against Baker Mayfield, to Lamar Jackson, to Joe Burrow, even when they won in Week 3. Even Daniel Jones had some of his best numbers against this Commanders defense. So what do you think is going to happen when you're going up against Jalen Hurts and Saquon and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith? So that's really what I'm going with. I think the Eagles defense has been a lot better than Washington's has this year. And as long as the offense does not get in the wrong way, as long as Sirianni doesn't screw it up, they're going to be fine. But I think it'll be really close. I'm really excited to see what happens here. But I think the Eagles will pull it out at home. I'll say they win 34-24. I think I'll leave it at that. Tyler O'Donoghue, let's see. Do the Steelers keep Fields, or do they try and trade him in the offseason for some more offensive weapons? That's a good question. I think, I'm about to get into this preview between the Steelers and the Ravens, so I'll answer this question first before I get into it. I don't really know what Pittsburgh is going to do with Justin Fields. I think Russell Wilson has done more than enough to keep the starting job heading into next season, but the reason why I don't know if you'd want to trade him, because what value does he really have? I mean, I understand that he did decently in the first weeks of the season, but, Justin Fields, he's got a fifth-year option, or his fifth-year option was declined. So I don't really think that – I think he's a free agent regardless, if I'm not mistaken. Let me pull it up quickly, because if he is a free agent heading into next offseason, then I don't really think that the Steelers have to worry about trading him, because they don't really have to pay him too much money. He's on a rookie contract, and it's pretty much pennies on the dollar compared to what the Steelers are paying their other players. So, okay, so I'm looking at it right now. I'm looking at his contract. 2025, he's an undrafted free agent. So, unrestricted free agent. So, I don't think you have to worry about trading Justin Fields. Sorry to go on that blog, but let's get into this preview. Pittsburgh versus Baltimore in Acrisure Stadium. So this is going to be really, really intriguing, because if you look at Lamar Jackson's past 3 games in Pittsburgh as a starting quarterback, the numbers are atrocious. He's only thrown 2 touchdown passes with 5 interceptions, and he's taken 16 sacks. Yeah, That's pretty atrocious. And the Steelers defense has been absolutely phenomenal this year. It's been the driving force of this team, like it's been many years in the past. And I don't think that it's going to be any different, to be quite honest with you. The Steelers, they're top 10 in total yards. They're not so great against the pass, but they're also fourth against the run. And in scoring defense, they're second, only giving up 16.2 points a game. So, honestly, if Baltimore cannot run the football with Derrick Henry, then I don't know how much of a successful game that Lamar Jackson's going to have. As phenomenal as he's been this year, because he's on pace to win his third MVP trophy in the last, 4 or 5 years. I think at some point in time, he's bound to have, a stinker performance, especially against a division rival on the road. Listen, Lamar Jackson is going to have to play like a god like he did against Cincinnati or against Denver. Really against Denver, because the Broncos have a more respectable defense. But let's get into these games here that they played in last week. Pittsburgh, like I said, coming off an impressive 28-27 win against Washington. Kind of shot themselves in the foot early on with a fake punt at their own 16-yard line. I get that the play design worked, but still, I didn't really like the decision. And more importantly, I hated the drop too, because that pretty much set up an easy touchdown for Washington. And even though the Steelers scored 2 early touchdowns, what a fantastic catch by George Pickens, by the way. They fell behind by 3 at the halftime because they gave up a 94-yard touchdown drive at the end of halftime, or before halftime, I should say. And then to start the third quarter, like I told you, they got gassed in just 2 minutes by Terry McLaurin and Austin Eckler. So they were now down 10 points, but the offense, started to get back into a little bit of a groove. They cut their deficit to 3, but then fell back even further with an interception and a lost fumble at the 1-yard line. But the thing is, their defense finally tightened up. They got the nerves shaken from them. Not that they don't really have any nerves, since this is the Steelers we're talking about, but they got their focus back. They got their composure back, and they only gave up 3 points for the rest of the game and never let Washington pull away, which allowed the Steelers to finally, turn the corner and make sure that they only put together one successful drive, because that's what all it was going to take to win this game. And lo and behold, big third down play, Mike Williams gets behind Benjamin St-Juste for the go-ahead touchdown, and you know the rest of the story. 4th down stop, Jajon Newton jumps off sides, end of ball game. So we already talked about that. Baltimore is coming off a Thursday night thriller against the Cincinnati Bengals. Last week when I talked about this game, I thought that this was going to be a little bit of a lower scoring game because, I felt like both defenses would have come to their senses and figured out what it was going to take for them to win this game. And early on, midway through the third quarter, it looked like Cincinnati was in cruise control. They were up 21-7. Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase were absolutely phenomenal. And Lamar Jackson punted 6 times on his first 7 drives. So if you had told me that, I would have said, okay, Cincinnati is doing great. As long as they don't screw up and turn the ball over, I don't think that the momentum is going to come anywhere close to getting back over to Baltimore. And then, sure enough, Chase Brown fumbles the football just 3 plays into the second drive, and it opened the floodgates for Baltimore. If you look at their next offensive drives after that fumble, touchdown, 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 touchdown. 4 touchdowns after that fumble. And the reason why they took the lead, a 28-21 lead, was because Joe Burrow got sacked on 3rd down on the first drive. And then on the next, they try to go for it on 4th down at the 32-yard line, or at the 34-yard line. And they try to chuck it deep to Jermaine Burton, who just got benched last week because he wasn't fitting into the offensive game plans and whatnot. And the ball was completely underthrown, and Lamar was able to walk in for the touchdown. Or Mark Andrews was able to walk in for the touchdown, I should say. And I get that Cincinnati did their best to keep up. Jamar Chase had 2 big touchdowns late in the 4th quarter to keep Cincinnati's chances alive. And all it came down to was the 2-point conversion in the final seconds. I love that Cincinnati tried to go for it because you're on the road. You're going up against Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, 2 of the leading candidates for MVP. You're going for the throat. You're not settling for the tie. No problems with it whatsoever. And I don't want to really hear anything about the 2 missed calls. on that 2-point conversion play because while they were egregious, throwing a stick route to Tanner Hudson over the middle was a way worse idea than throwing the ball to your best player who's been flat out unstoppable the entire night. Jamar Chase on Thursday night caught 11 passes for 264 yards with 3 touchdowns. And by the way, in their last matchup against in Cincinnati, I'm sorry, I'm just pulling up these notes right here because I don't want to miss it. If you look at the numbers from their last matchup, let me see if I can find it quickly. Jamar Chase, 10 catches, 193 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So that's pretty much what? Over 400 receiving yards and 5 touchdown receptions in 2 games, and you don't throw him the football when you have a chance to win? That is what really sealed the deal for me. Not just that fumble, but that 2-point conversion because, to be quite honest, you throw the ball to Jamar Chase, you get the win, and I get that you're giving Lamar Jackson enough time to go win the game himself, but the odds would have been better for Cincinnati. But give Lamar Jackson credit. He had a hell of a game. He's pretty much the leading candidate for MVP right now because he's been absolutely godly. Lamar Jackson on Thursday night, 25 of 33, 290 yards, 4 touchdown passes, and 0 interceptions. If you look at his numbers throughout the entire season, they're the best numbers of his whole career. Nearly 2,700 yards, second in the league, 24 touchdown passes that leads the entire NFL, and 2 interceptions. 2. His rushing numbers, he took off for 91 times, has 538 yards, and only a couple touchdown runs. He's using his arm more. He's more accurate than he's been in his career. He's more precise with the football. And instead of using his legs to bail him out of dangerous situations, he's relying more on his arm because he has the confidence in his teammates to make plays down the field and to make sure that they're getting the points necessary to win football games. So defensively, they're a wreck. Their secondary cannot stop anybody. They have not gotten to the quarterback as well as they used to last year. Last year, they led the league in sacks. This year, they're nowhere near that. And I get that they're absolutely great against the run, but when teams are realizing that they can throw the ball against them at will, no doubt you're going to give up the fewest rushing yards because nobody's trying to run the ball against you. So heading into this game in Pittsburgh, this is going to be a defensive clinic because we all know what Pittsburgh can do against any team in the league. We know what they can do against Lamar Jackson because the sample size says that Lamar Jackson struggles. And if you can knock him off his spot and keep him in the pocket, then that's all it's going to take to win, especially when you have Derrick Henry in the backfield. You shut down the run, you keep Lamar Jackson in the pocket, it's going to give Russell Wilson enough opportunities to make some plays on his own. But this is really going to be another huge test for Pittsburgh's offense. I mean, I get that Baltimore's defense has been trash, but if Lamar Jackson somehow breaks out of this mold and has another signature performance that increases his odds of winning a 3rd MVP, then who knows what it's going to take from Russell Wilson to really pull another win out of his hat. But I actually have a lot of faith in the Steelers in this one. I know that Tyler Donahue is not going to be happy about this. I'll answer that question in just a second. But listen, it's a division rivalry game. Baltimore's on the road. We saw them struggle against Cleveland and let Jameis Winston have a field day with over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's not just the fact that I think Baltimore's defense is going to struggle against Russell Wilson and Najee Harris and George Pickens and those guys, but how are you going to do against TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith, a former Raven and Patrick Queen, and an elite secondary that's headlined by Dante Jackson, Minka Fitzpatrick, and Joey Porter Jr.? I like Pittsburgh's chances to win. I think it'll be low scoring. I say they get it done 19-10. 19-10. Steelers stand no chance. Hey, the numbers say that Lamar Jackson is not going to have that great of a game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. 2 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 16 sacks taken. I have not seen a defense have that dominating of a performance against an elite quarterback than I do with Pittsburgh when it comes to Lamar Jackson. I know that Cleveland can say the same thing about Joe Burrow, but we saw what happened earlier this season. So, to be quite honest, anything can happen, but I'm just going to go with my gut and say that Pittsburgh pulls off a huge upset at home. And they're in first place in their division. Whoever wins this is going to host a playoff game at home. Without a doubt, most likely. Do the Ravens have a legit chance to win the Super Bowl? Yeah. Every year they have a legit chance to win the Super Bowl as long as you have Lamar Jackson fully healthy. But here's the problem. When it comes to the playoffs, we don't know what we're going to get from them because they always find a way to beat themselves and to shoot themselves in the foot. We saw it in 2018 against the Chargers when Lamar Jackson had nowhere to go with the football. We saw it in 2019 when Tennessee shut down the run and made Lamar Jackson throw the football, which only resulted in 12 points. We saw it in Buffalo when they got shut down 17-3. And last year, we saw it against Kansas City when they only ran the ball, 3 or 5 times and turned the ball over 3 times against Kansas City? Yeah. Every year they have a legit chance to win the Super Bowl. But if they at least stick to what works for them and not try to play hero ball every freaking 5 or 10 seconds, then they'll be fine. And they're finally going to break their curse. And they're finally going to shut down the narratives that Lamar Jackson can't get it done when it matters most. So they have a legit chance, but it's up to them to decide where their destiny lies. And with that being said, let's move on to the next game. We got the Detroit Lions versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Oh, boy. Where do I even start here? Because one is coming off an atrocious loss, which is expected, and the other is coming off an atrocious victory. So, honestly, let's start with the team that won, which is the Detroit Lions, which at halftime I did not think was possible because Detroit was down 23-7. Jared Goff threw 3 interceptions. In the third quarter, he threw 2 more to cap off a 5-interception performance. Houston was moving the ball extremely well, and Detroit could not run the football whatsoever, which meant that Jared Goff was essentially going to play hero ball, and Houston shut him down. They took away what worked for him. They took away the play action, and it looked like Detroit was going to walk into an ugly blowout defeat. And it looked like the historical streak was going to continue in which Houston had never lost to Detroit in their history as a franchise. But the reason why Houston was not able to pull away in the third quarter is because C.J. Stroud threw 2 interceptions of his own to Carlton Davis. A game that could have easily been 38-7 heading into the fourth quarter was somehow only a 10-point game because Detroit finally recollected themselves. They ran the ball a lot better. They adjusted their protections. Jared Goff stopped turning the ball over, and he made a few clutch throws that increased Detroit's momentum. But defensively, they were flat out outstanding because in the second half, Houston only picked up 5 first downs and had 97 total yards of offense. In the second half alone, Detroit went on a 19-0 scoring run. 19-0. I understand that Nico Collins was out and that Stephon Diggs is out for the season. But every single freaking game this year, with the exception of Week 6 against the New England Patriots, the Houston Texans offense has been flat out inconsistent. They have been alarmingly fraudulent, and they always somehow barely escape every single game they played in. We saw it against the Colts, the Bears, the Bills, the Jaguars, and now we nearly saw it again against Detroit when they had a 16-point lead in their favor heading into halftime. And in the fourth quarter, Detroit completely flipped it because they were able to score a huge touchdown with a wide-open score to Amon-Ra St. Brown on a screen. That cut their deficit to 3. And then not only did Houston punt and miss the field goal from 58 yards away that would have given them a 3-point lead heading into the fourth quarter, but Detroit did more than enough to move down the field on their final 2 drives to set up 2 50-plus yard field goals from Jake Bates. Obviously, a UFL legend, played for the Detroit Panthers, and had some clutch kicks of his own. But last year, he was literally laying bricks and did not have any shot of having an NFL career. But in this game against the Houston Texans on Sunday Night Football, not only did he make 2 50-yard field goals to win the game, but they barely creaked inside the uprights. They veered left to the post, and then it somehow turned at the last second to get through, and Detroit won 26-23. Jared Goff only completed 15 of 30 passes for 240 yards, but they ran the ball a lot better. Gibbs had 71 on the ground. David Montgomery, 32. Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown finished with 60 yards. Jameson Williams had a few big catches. And they finally got their focus back. And they recollected themselves, like I said. And, you know, they showed their grit. They showed their perseverance. They showed their toughness. But it feels like we're walking into last year all over again. And I'm praying to God that things don't fall apart when things are seemingly heading into the right direction, because defense has been absolutely incredible since Aiden Hutchinson got injured. And that's not to say that they are better without him, but they showed that they were not ending the season without a fight, and that there was no way in hell that they were just going to somehow out of the blue collapse because their best player got hurt. So I'll give them a lot of credit in that regard, but they're doing a lot better than Jacksonville. That's for damn sure. I mean, let's put this in perspective. Minnesota had 402 yards of offense. They held the ball for 42 minutes. They had the ball in the red zone 5 times, yet it was only a 5-point game. Jacksonville's defense, I don't know how much better of a performance that you could ask for them, because they did not give up a single touchdown. They picked off Sam Darnold 3 times, and it took 4 field goals from a backup kicker for Minnesota to score all their points. But every time that Sam Darnold gifted Jacksonville the ball back, the end result was punt. Every single time. Punt, punt, punt. The Patriot fan of me wanted Mac Jones to do well in his first start of the season, and he did so. On his second drive of the game, they moved down the field in about 6 or 7 plays, or probably even longer than that. But the point is, Mac Jones scored a rushing touchdown, and Jacksonville was up 7-3. And they still were up heading into the fourth quarter. But after that, they just were completely shut down for the rest of the game, like they were expected to, because Minnesota's defense has been absolutely incredible all season long. I mean, look at it right here. Mac Jones only threw for 111 yards. They had 10 first downs the entire game, 143 total yards of offense. And in the second half, they picked up 4 first downs and only had 42 yards. And in the fourth quarter, everything fell apart. Mac Jones botches the snap. The Vikings recovered. And on the final 2 drives with a chance to win, their quarterback throws 2 horrible interceptions, which reminded us all why the Patriots finally benched him for Bailey Zappi last year. Yeah, the Jaguars are absolutely horrific. I mean, Doug Peterson after the game is, ripping on the media by saying, "Oh, you want to know what happened on those interceptions? Well, I'm not going to explain it to you because obviously you couldn't figure out what happened." He's got his foot out the door already. They don't have a quarterback. Trevor Lawrence, they're saying that he could be back in a couple weeks, but there are other reports saying that he could miss the rest of the season because of a shoulder injury. Tank Bigsby's hurt, and he's been the only source of offense. They can't throw the freaking ball because their quarterback turns the ball over ad nauseum. The defense is flat out horrific, even though last week was an anomaly. And now they're going on the road against the Detroit Lions when they're trying to shake off an ugly 26-23 victory on the road against Houston. I got Detroit winning this game easily. I mean, I don't even need to explain why. I think it's going to be a get-right game for the Lions. And I don't expect Jared Goff to have another horrific performance like he did last week. Unless somehow, some way, the Jaguars defense, unless the Jaguars defense decides to play lights out once again. But even then, it's just like, what are you going to do if Mac Jones just keeps turning the ball over and causing them a chance to actually get another win on the board? But I'll say the Lions win 40-10. It's not going to be close. Okie dokie. Now we get to the Rams versus the Patriots. One is coming off an impressive victory against the Chicago Bears, 19-3. And the other could not score a single touchdown at home on Monday Night Football against the Miami Dolphins. Let me just start with the Patriots game because I only have one thing to say about the Chicago Bears. They suck. They are absolutely freaking garbage. I mean, they are quite possibly the most backwards organization in the history of the National Football League. And I was happy that my team won. I was flat out stunned, and I literally was laughing because I did not expect them to win. Their defense was absolutely sensational. They sacked Caleb Williams 9 times. only allowed 3 points and flat out shut them down from start to finish. But I mean, offensively, and even offensively, Drake May looked a little more competent than Caleb Williams did. And I'm saying a little more because it took 4 field goals from Joey Slye for them to get close to 20 points. So I'm not completely thrilled, but listen, I'm not complaining. I mean, the Bears are a freaking dumpster fire right now. They just fired their offensive coordinator and Shea Waldron. Caleb Williams is regressing, and it looks like that the team has completely lost him because I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, but after he got sacked for what felt like the millionth time, not only did he look to the sideline in disgust, but a freaking Patriots player had to help him off the ground and not one of his teammates, which just goes to show how much of a dysfunctional environment the Chicago Bears have been this year. I mean, I get that Chicago was without their 2 starting tackles, but Caleb Williams is not seeing the field. DJ Moore is not getting the ball like Justin Fields did last year. Got him the ball last year. Romo Dunze, he's been a little iffy. Same thing with Keenan Allen. Colt Kmet has hardly been involved in the game plan. They don't run the freaking ball. And it looks like Caleb Williams still thinks that he's at USC playing against teams like Cal Berkeley or Oregon State or whatever the heck program in the Pac-12 that is pretty bad right now. Or in the Big Ten, whichever teams decided to move there last year. But listen, as a Patriots fan, I'm definitely happy. I'm not completely satisfied because they're still 3-7, and there were still a few games that could have gone the other way that I would have loved to see them win. But listen, offensively, they were fine. They ran the ball a lot better than they did in the last 3 weeks. The receivers are getting more involved. The offensive line is gelling. It's doing okay. And defensively, they finally had a solid performance. They didn't wet the bed. They didn't give up too many yards against the run. They didn't lie down and die. They played with some urgency. You know, Gerard Mayo had them motivated the way that they were supposed to. And you know what? I got to tip my hat off to them. I really liked what I saw from them. The Rams, on the other hand, they got completely punked and shell-shocked by this Miami Dolphins defense. I mean, in the last 2 weeks, Miami got carved up by Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals, and then Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Matthew Stafford, I'm not even going to bring up the yards because a lot of them were just garbage time yards, mainly in the fourth quarter. And outside of that, it was absolutely horrific. It took 5 field goals by Joshua Carty for the Rams to score all of their points. They turned the ball over twice. Matthew Stafford got sacked 4 times. And yeah, I get that the defense was doing everything they could to make this a game. They sacked 2 or 3 times. They forced a couple turnovers on their own. But when you allow 3 out of 4 third down conversions or 4 out of 6 third down conversions in the second half, you're not going to be able to take the lead. You know, they were down 10-6 at halftime, and they gave up a couple big touchdowns. But if the Rams had found a way to get into the end zone, then they might have had a better shot. But the offense, their luck ran out because we saw it happen against the Raiders and against the Seahawks, where they struggled to gain any consistency, and they had to rely on garbage opponents to somehow self-destruct for a victory. And Miami just said, we need our season to stay alive. There's no way in hell we're going to fall to 2-7. We have too much talent to be in this position. Let's string together some wins now before we completely fall into a hole that we can't get out of. And listen, the Dolphins offense wasn't completely perfect, but they got touchdowns on the board. And that was the biggest difference in the game. And the Rams could not live up to that. But I think that LA will bounce back in this one. I don't really think that they're going to struggle against this Patriots defense unless somehow, some way Matthew Stafford can't get out of this funk. You know, they're finally healthy. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are on the field. A bunch of starters on their offensive line are finally back. Defensively, you know, they figured out who needs to be on the field more often and who their most impactful playmakers are. And with the Patriots, I think they can get scrappy and pull together a couple decent drives, but outside of that, I feel like they're going to be outmatched. You know, the Rams defense, they're hungry and opportunistic, and offensively, they have more efficiency than the Patriots do. So that's why I think LA will win. I think they'll bounce back. I'll say they get it done 27-17. little bit of a lower scoring game. I don't think it'll be a blowout, but I mean, listen, when you have Sean McVay and you're coming off a big loss, I think that most of the time they'll find a way to get back on their feet, especially when they're 4-5 and still need a lot of wins to inch into the playoff race. I don't think they can afford to lose this game, especially with the division they're in. You know, the Cardinals are in first place. The 49ers are right behind them. And even the Seahawks, I mean, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but technically speaking, they still have a shot. So we'll see how it plays out from there. Now we get to the New Orleans Saints versus the Cleveland Browns in the Superdome. The Saints have finally ended their 7-game losing streak against the Atlanta Falcons. And listen, it wasn't perfect. It was only a 3-point game, but they actually played with a lot more consistency, and they finally got out of this slump that they were in over the past 2 months. In the first half, they were near unstoppable. I mean, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, of all receivers, caught 3 passes for 105 yards with 2 touchdown receptions. Derek Carr was 11 of 15 for 258 yards with 0 turnovers. And Kirk Cousins completed less than 50% of his passes. Sure, they had a touchdown to get themselves on the board, but it felt like the Saints had perfect control of this game. They were up 10 at halftime, and a field goal allowed them to, increase the lead and increase their chances of pulling it out. But in the fourth quarter, they were only able to put up 17 yards of offense. So that was why Atlanta was able to hang around and get themselves back into the game. But Younghoe Koo, it was a career worst performance for him. He missed 4 field goals, or he was 1 for 4 for the day, which means he missed 3 field goals. When do you ever see Younghoe Koo, an all-pro player, one of the most accurate field goal kickers in the league, have that atrocious of a performance than he did on Sunday afternoon? And not only did he gag, but the rest of the offense did, because when it was time for Kirk Cousins to close the deal and win the game, he choked. With about a few minutes, with about 2 or 3 minutes left to go, he threw a back-breaking interception to Tyrann Mathieu, and after completing a pass to Kyle Pitts on the final drive with 28 seconds left, they had the worst clock management possible by running it all the way down to 6 seconds on 4th down, only to throw a check down pass to Ray McCloud short of the sticks and for it to get completely blown up. So New Orleans' defense, they held strong. They didn't collapse like they did in week 4 against the Atlanta Falcons on the final drive of the game. And the offense finally played with more consistency. They played with a lot more firepower. Derek Carr finished with 269 yards. Alvin Kamara had 100 yards from scrimmage. And even though their offense fell flat in the second half, they at least stayed ahead, and they never trailed. And they didn't make any stupid decisions that completely led Atlanta back into the game. So give credit where it's due. And now that the Browns are coming off of a bye week, I don't know what we're going to get from them. Either Jameis Winston is going to play great in his return to the Superdome, or he's going to throw 3 or 4 interceptions and completely blow any sort of chance that the Browns have of pulling off this upset. I think the Saints will win. They're at home. They feel like they have a lot of momentum. Offensively, I think they could do pretty well against the Browns defense that has regressed from last year. And more importantly, I just really don't know. Like I said, I don't know what I'm going to get from Jameis Winston. Either we're going to have a great performance or a bad performance. And if it's in the middle, then I don't know. It'll be close. So I'll say the Saints win. I think it'll come down to the pretty end, or down to the wire. And I just have a lot more faith in Derek Carr than I do with Jameis Winston. I know that's not saying a lot, but at the same time, it's just both teams are horrific. I mean, they're not good. They're not going to make the playoffs. They did this to themselves. One team already fired their head coach, but I'll still say the Saints will win 17-10. All right, next up, we got the Jets versus the Colts. Both are coming off pretty unfortunate losses. I'll just start with the Colts because it was a lot closer of a game. They had a 13-10 lead in the second quarter. Jonathan Taylor ran for 100 yards, and, he was doing enough to give the Colts offense some life, so I'll give him credit there. But honestly, Joe Flacco was the biggest reason why they lost. He turned the ball over 4 times. He threw 3 interceptions and lost a fumble. 2 of those picks were on the first 2 drives Excuse me. And the first one was a pick six to Teron Johnson that completely blew the game wide open. I understand that the defense picked off Josh Allen twice and didn't allow him to throw a single touchdown pass. But every time that Indianapolis coughed up the football, especially in the second half, the Bills took advantage of their opportunities. I mean, Josh Allen still threw for 280 yards. James Cook had 80 yards on the ground. And both Khalil Shakir and Matt Collins did what they could to be the top receiving targets. They were 7 for 14 on third down. They had 415 yards of offense and had 21 first downs. So the penalties and turnovers were backbreakers. And honestly, I don't like that they let Indianapolis hang around, but the Colts had plenty of chances to steal this game. It's just they kept turning the ball over. And the more they turned the ball over and the more times that Joe Flacco got sacked, which was also 4, then they had no chance. There was never going to be any chance of them pulling off the subset with the amount of times they kept shooting themselves in the foot. I know I've used that phrase a lot, but again, it's been like that with a lot of games and with a lot of teams. So heading into this game, or actually, I didn't even get into the Jets because they are coming off a blowout defeat to the Arizona Cardinals, 31-6. And to be quite honest, I expected this to happen. A lot of Jets fans had so much false hope heading into this game because they thought, oh, we beat the Texans on Thursday Night Football. Aaron Rodgers looked great, and we sacked C.J. Stroud 8 times. We're going to look tremendous. And then heading into Arizona, they got completely run off the field. The defense gave up 4 straight scoring drives and 1 punt, which is when they were down 31-6. The offense scored 6 points on their first 2 drives and got shut down for the rest of the game. Aaron Rodgers was pathetic. He was only 22 of 35 for 151 yards with 3 sacks and no touchdowns. Garrett Wilson only had 40 yards. Devontae Adams with 31. And, I mean, Arizona just played with a lot more adrenaline and more momentum. They were more efficient on offense. They spread the ball around to several different players. James Conner, Trey Benson, Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, the whole bit. Kyler Murray scored 3 touchdowns. James Conner had another 100-plus yard performance from scrimmage, the 6th time he's done that all season. And, I mean, the more that the Cardinals scored, the more that the Jets quit. But if there's any shot for the Jets to win, it's this game because Indianapolis has benched Joe Flacco for Anthony Richardson. I thought that the Bears were the most backwards organization in football, but the Colts are not far behind. Because let's put this in perspective. They lose 23-20 to the Texans because their quarterback was completely inaccurate and nowhere near ready to be a starting quarterback. So they give Joe Flacco 2 chances to get this team back on track. And in both games, they completely fell flat and turned the ball over ad nauseum and got crushed by 2 legitimate foes in the Vikings and the Bills. So now that they put Anthony Richardson back onto the field and sent Joe Flacco back over to the sidelines, my big question is, what the hell is their vision? Like, what is their game plan? You say you wanted Anthony Richardson to develop and to realize what was going wrong for him and for him to clean up his act, but you find yourselves 4-6 and you're like, now we're going to move on from it. We're going to move on with Anthony Richardson for the rest of the season. Like, what are we doing? I get that Joe Flacco hasn't been playing great, but you knew what situation you were heading into. We knew that Joe Flacco did well last year when he took the Browns to the playoffs. But those wins that he strung together were against garbage franchises. And we saw that unfold first and foremost in the wild card game against the Texans when they got blown off the field 45-14. This season, more or less the same thing. You have a great performance against Pittsburgh with Justin Fields. You look absolutely tremendous against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But then when you finally give Joe Flacco the keys to the car, gag and gag. I try to find the right word for it because I didn't want to be too disrespectful. I like Joe Flacco. I think that he's had a successful NFL career. But for this football team, you are literally a quarterback and a defense, mainly a quarterback, away from being a respectable football team. And the fact that you made this decision shows that you really have no idea where you're going as a football team because you're benching a 39-year-old past his prime quarterback for a second-year player, a former 4th overall pick that has proven to not be a good quarterback in this league. as a thrower and as a leader. And that is very bad. So I think that the Jets should win this game. I don't know if they will win because it's the freaking New Jersey Jets, for crying out loud. But I'll say that Aaron Rodgers looks decent. I'll say that Breece Hall has a great game because the Colts have one of the worst rushing defenses in the league. But if New York somehow gets gashed by this Indianapolis Colts offense, then who knows if Jeff Ulbrich lasts the entire season. You know what? Fire 2 head coaches because they're running out of options at this point. You fire Robert Saleh. Clearly, that wasn't the problem. You demoted an offensive coordinator. That wasn't the issue. You bring in Davante Adams. That didn't solve anything. You traded away Mike Williams. That didn't solve anything. Sauce Gardner, disappointing. Davante Adams can only do so much. Garrett Wilson, flashes from time to time. Aaron Rodgers, washed. Offensive line, injured. Defense, regress. Head coach, bad. Management, bad. Ownership, horrible. So, if the Jets don't win this game, then in my power rankings list, you're falling all the way to the bottom. Give me the Jets 17-14. That's as good as it's going to get, to be quite honest with you. Okay, now we get to the Minnesota Vikings versus the Tennessee Titans. I'll start with Tennessee because I didn't really get to talk about them earlier on in the show. Tennessee is coming off a pretty bad loss to the Los Angeles Chargers, 27-17. Will Levis got sacked 7 times, but the good news is he didn't throw an interception. He actually had a decent game if you look at the box score. 18 of 23 for 175 yards with 2 touchdown passes. Like, honestly, that's the best he's looked since his first career start against the Atlanta Falcons. But at the same time, 7 sacks taken, and after your opening drive, no points until garbage time, or no touchdowns until garbage time, I can say, then clearly it was not enough to get the job done. Defensively, they let Justin Herbert pick them apart for most of the afternoon. The LA Chargers had 8 total drives. They punted it just 3 times. They were efficient. They were mistake-free. They ran the ball well. They were able to throw the ball well as well. God, I cannot talk for the life of me. But again, it wasn't perfect. It wasn't overly impressive, but they got points on the board. They were efficient. They had a lot of successful drives, and they handled their business. They did what they were supposed to do, and it was needed because if they didn't win this game, then their wild card chances would have been completely pummeled because I don't know how you were able to overcome a home loss to a Titans team that is nowhere near that stage at that point of the season. But at the same time, Minnesota, it's their next opponent. Tennessee is heading back home, and Minnesota is coming off an ugly victory against Jacksonville. In a game where they totaled 400 yards of offense, had the ball for 42 minutes, and were in the red zone 5 times, they only scored 12 points from 4 made field goals by a backup kicker who was only on the field because their starter, Will Reichert, is on IR. Sam Darnold threw 3 interceptions, and he better thank the good Lord that his defense played absolutely lights out against a garbage heap of a franchise in the Jacksonville Jaguars with a broken quarterback, because if they somehow lost this game, then they would have immediately been written off for the postseason, and it probably would have been the most atrocious collapse in recent memory. Not as bad as the Eagles last year, but somewhere around that mark. Heading into this game, I don't know how Minnesota can lose this one. This should be a bounce-back game. I am really concerned for Sam Darnold because I'm afraid that he's starting to see the ghosts again, because over the last 4 weeks, he has not lived up to expectations. He has fallen flat in all 4 of his games. And I get that he's won a few, and I get that he won this game, but if they somehow turn the ball over against the team with the fewest, that is giving up the fewest passing yards in football, then I don't know how you're going to be able to do. I don't know how you're going to do against teams like the Lions or the Packers or even Arizona, because they play them later on in the year. So Minnesota should win, but I think Tennessee will have a couple decent drives, just like they did last week. But I just think they're going to run into a vastly superior opponent. Just the only question mark is that quarterback. That's it. I'll say the Vikings win 27-17. Let's move on to these next games here. Let me see how many more we got left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Now we got the Dolphins versus the Raiders. I'm just going to jump right into it because we already talked about what happened with the Dolphins against the Rams. Coming off an impressive Monday night victory, didn't give up a single touchdown, sacked Matthew Stafford 4 times, turned the ball over twice. And while their offense wasn't perfect, they at least breached the end zone. They were 4 for 6 on third down in the second half. And even though their best players didn't have the best games, Tua at least did enough to make sure that they didn't give up the lead or that they didn't fall apart. So, wasn't great, wasn't pretty, but it was just enough. And the Raiders are coming off a bye week. They announced that they're going with Gardner Minshew again as their starting quarterback. And I think that the Dolphins are going to win. I think their offense is going to play great. The Raiders defense has not lived up to expectations, especially against quality opponents. And more importantly, their offense is absolutely horrific. Like, they can't run the ball. They don't have anybody to throw the ball to besides Bowers or Jacoby Myers. And their quarterback situation is a nightmare because Aiden O'Connell is on IR because of a broken thumb. Gardner Minshew has been a turnover magnet. And Desmond Ridder, don't even get me started. So I'll say the Dolphins win 34-6. All right, now we get to the Packers versus the Bears. Packers are coming off a bye, and the Bears are coming off a 19-3 loss to the New England Patriots. Washington and Arizona was one thing. Those two teams are trying to compete for a playoff spot. They're having respectable seasons. But the Patriots defense has been flat out torched all season long. Their offensive line is a disaster. They don't have receivers that can catch the ball. And yet they made the Patriots look passable and decent and respectable. 9 sacks given up, 3 points scored, 11 first downs, 4 of them in the second half, 142 yards, 1 for 14 on third down. And it was the last straw for Shane Waldron, who got fired as the offensive coordinator. Listen, is it all of Shane Waldron's fault? No, because Caleb Williams is hindering the guys around him to do their jobs. It's pretty much 5-step drops. He looks to throw the ball deep every single time. I don't know if that's him or if that's the offensive coordinator. They don't run the freaking ball, even though you have a 3-year contract, or you have a 3-year running back in DeAndre Swift, who's proven to be a capable starter in this league. DJ Moore is not getting the football. Rome Odunze, like I said, has not had a great rookie season. Cole Kmet is barely getting the football. Keenan Allen has only been the only decent option. The offensive line is without their 2 starting tackles, and the defense is completely undisciplined and unprepared on any given week. And if but at the same time, Shane Waldron has not done himself any favors. The play calling has been atrocious. You saw that offensive lineman handoff against the Commanders inside the 5-yard line. That was really a huge blemish. They've only scored 1 touchdown in their last 24 drives over the last 3 games. You're supposed to have a Pro Bowl roster that is supposed to finally get this team over the hump and is finally supposed to take this team back into the playoff picture. But all of a sudden, they can't move the ball. They can't get points on the board. And Matt Eberflus's seat is getting hotter and hotter by the moment. Like I said earlier, they are the most backwards organization in football because every single time that they have a glimmer of hope or that their window somehow has a little bit of a crack in it, it gets completely shut again because they fail to properly develop their quarterback and they fail to keep him on his freaking feet with a smile on his face. And again, he has a lot of accountability to take up also because he has to realize that this is the NFL and not the freaking Pac-12. But every single year they make the same mistakes over and over and over. This is now the 3rd time that a rookie quarterback or that their franchise quarterback is going to have 2 new offensive coordinators in his first 2 seasons. And now you're going up against the Green Bay Packers, who have pretty much owned you year after year after year. Give me the Packers. I think they'll bounce back. I don't think they're going to play perfect, but I have a lot more faith in Jordan Love than I do with Caleb Williams. Thomas Brown is going to be the de facto or going to be the interim OC. I hope he could do a good job, but I mean, the Chicago Bears are just flat out trash at this point. They're horrible. I mean, there's no leadership, there's no accountability, there's no winning culture. Their offense is a turnstile, and the defense just flat out quits when they fall behind. But I'll say the Packers win. I'll say they win 27-13. If Chicago can't score a touchdown here, then they don't deserve to make the playoffs. They're done. Their season's over. Because every single time they try to improve the roster, it's like, okay, they're good, but if you could get through these two teams, mainly Green Bay or Detroit, Minnesota too, because they're having a good season, but if you could get through those three teams, then you'll really realistically have a shot. But no, their best wins have been against, let's see, Tennessee, Carolina, Jacksonville, and Los Angeles. LA has been the only decent win, but they were injury riddled in that game. The other three teams, Tennessee, 2 wins. Jacksonville, 2 wins. Carolina, 3 wins. Great. Nice job. You beat garbage franchises and you've shrunk against the good ones. Congratulations. You're just the Dallas Cowboys in the NFC North. That's it. All right. Enough ranting. Let's talk about the Falcons and the Broncos. Talked about Atlanta. They completely gagged a winnable game. Their defense got torched in the first half. Their offense completely fell apart. Yahweh Koo missed 3 field goals, was 1 for 4 the entire afternoon, and they did not deserve to win that game. They had the worst clock management in the final seconds. Kirk Cousins threw a horrible interception to Tyrann Mathieu with a chance to at least tie it or win it himself when he had matters into his own hands. And, I mean, they ended the Saints' 7-game losing streak. Like, that's humiliating in and of itself. And if this was with Arthur Smith and Desmond Ridder, it would be even worse. But heading into this game, I don't know if Atlanta's going to have a good shot. I understand that Denver lost on a blocked field goal to the Kansas City Chiefs, but it only took that play for them to lose because they were literally this close to handing the Chiefs their first loss of the season. You know, they didn't give up a single touchdown in the second half. They only let up 1 end zone trip the entire game. Defensively, they were doing everything they could. And Bo Nix, even though he couldn't score in the second half, had decent numbers. 215 yards, 2 touchdown passes, including a 32-yard strike to Cortland Sutton to go up 14-3. I don't know what more they could have done, but the special teams and the failed offensive output in the second half, it completely cost them. And that 60-yard miss at the end of the first half. But at the same time, I feel like it was just a desperation attempt at anything. But heading into the Mile High Stadium, I think the Broncos have a good shot of winning. I like their defense a lot more than Atlanta's. The Falcons cannot sack the quarterback, even though they have Grady Jarrett and Arnold Ebiketie and Matthew Judon. The Denver Broncos, they have one of the best secondaries in the league. They have an outstanding front 7. They're also great against the run. And Atlanta, if they can't run the ball extremely well, they are essentially daring Kirk Cousins to beat you. I understand that Lamar Jackson had a perfect passer rating against this same Broncos defense, but I don't think that the Falcons are as dangerous as Baltimore's. They got Bijan Robinson, you got Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Darnell Mooney, but if you're making Kirk Cousins beat you on the road, then I don't really like the sound of that. And it's not the first time where he's proven us wrong, because he did it against the Buccaneers in 2 games. Thursday Night Football when he threw for 500 yards, and then in Tampa when he threw 4 touchdown passes. But, I mean, listen, I like Denver's defense a lot better than Tampa's. I can say that. So, I like the Broncos here. They got the elevation to their advantage. I like their defense in this one, and they got plenty of momentum. They're a wild card contender, and as long as Bo Nix doesn't turn the ball over, like I say over and over again, they always have a shot. So, Broncos win 23-16. We got 4 more games left. Let's talk about the 49ers and the Seahawks. So, San Francisco is coming off a pretty close victory against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 20-17. And Brock Purdy threw for 353 yards and 2 touchdown passes. But to be quite honest, it should not have been close. Jake Moody missed 3 field goals. Kyle Shanahan decided to pass the ball in the final 3 minutes instead of running the football to make Tampa burn all their timeouts. The defense had 4 penalties on the final drive that allowed Tampa to tie the game up at 20. And honestly, like, if the 49ers didn't muff the punt to start the third quarter, I don't think the Bucs would have even had a chance to take the lead, let alone even the score. So I get that San Francisco did enough, but to be quite honest, like I said before, they hit their peak. And I think that too many teams have them figured out now. Their offense isn't as explosive as they once were. I don't think that their defense is as scary as they once were. They're no longer feared in the NFL. And now they're just going to be, a division winner at best that will get bounced out of the second round by a team that wants it more. Like, unfortunately, like, when you choke to the Chiefs in 2 Super Bowls and fall short in 2 conference championship games to the Rams and to the Eagles in between, then it's only going to be a matter of time before that window starts to close. And honestly, I think their luck is running out. But heading into this game, they're at home. They're going up against the Seahawks team that's coming off a bye week. They already beat Seattle on the road, and we know what type of script they're going to follow. Seattle's going to play scrappy. They're going to do what it takes to make this a close game, but San Francisco's high-end talent and high-level velocity, it's going to be too much for Seattle to overcome. And that's why I think that the 49ers are going to win 30-14. That's going to be the final score. Even if it's different, even if it's higher or lower, I think the same type of script is going to follow. It'll be scrappy. It'll be close early on, but the 49ers, they'll figure out how to pull away sooner than later. All right, now we get to what many think will be America's game of the week between the Chiefs and the Bills. We know the storylines: Mahomes versus Josh Allen. One is undefeated in the postseason. The other is 3-1 in the regular season. And unfortunately, in this situation, Josh Allen is the latter. He's 3-1 against Patrick Mahomes in the regular season, but he has yet to beat him in the playoffs. Honestly, I don't really need to preview them because they did what they needed to do. The Chiefs kept their undefeated season alive, even though it took a blocked field goal from Leo Chenal to do it, while the Bills overcame 2 interceptions and 0 touchdown passes to beat the Colts by 10 and to pretty much handle their business on the road. Honestly, it's going to be a lower scoring game. We know what happened to the regular season. Both defenses tighten up. We don't really see the quarterbacks in the spotlight as much. And now that it's in Buffalo, I think Buffalo's offense should have a little bit more momentum. But if to be quite honest, they're a little banged up. They don't have They don't have Keon Coleman. They might not have Amari Cooper. Really, you're only relying on Khalil Shakir and Matt Collins and Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, along with James Cook, to be your primary weapons. And while Josh Allen can do that against any team in the league, I don't know how much success you're going to have against an elite defense that the Kansas City Chiefs have. And when you're going up against Patrick Mahomes, who has a quality supporting cast with Travis Kelce and DeAndre Hopkins and Kareem Hunt, against a Bills defense that has been very shaky at best this season, then really you're asking Josh Allen to play perfect. And Steve Spagnuolo is going to do everything in his power to make sure that does not happen by any means necessary. If anybody could give the Chiefs their first loss of the season, it's the Buffalo Bills. But until the Kansas City Chiefs finally fall apart and finally crumble, then I can't pick against them. I think the Chiefs will win. Both defenses are going to play well enough because, that's usually what we've gotten from them in the last 2 regular season games from these 2 teams. But I just trust Mahomes a lot more than Josh Allen. I think that their offense will make enough plays down the stretch, especially against an inconsistent Bills defense. I'll say the Chiefs win 22, or actually, no, not 22, 23-20. All right. Now we get to Sunday Night Football between the Chargers and the Bengals. Don't really need to recap what happened between them last week because we got into it. Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow have phenomenal performances, but a fumble in the third quarter allowed the Ravens to score 4 straight touchdowns to take a 35-28 lead. Cincinnati fails on the 2-point conversion on an ensuing touchdown drive, and they lose another heartbreaking game to fall to 4-6. The Chargers, coming off a expected victory against the Titans. 5 scores on 8 drives against the Tennessee Titans. Defense comes up with 7 sacks. Only one legitimate touchdown drive before a garbage time score late in the 4th. All right? Did what they needed to do. Handled their business. Sunday Night Football, to be quite honest, I think the Chargers are going to win. I'm done having faith that the Cincinnati Bengals can keep their season on track. Chargers have not had too many impressive victories, but when it comes to teams with losing records, the Chargers know what they need to do to win. We know that they're going to run the football. We know that Justin Herbert is set up for a great day because the Cincinnati Bengals defense has been utter garbage this year. And more importantly, the Bengals offense, as efficient and as dynamic as they've been all year, they always have that one little screw up that turns around the whole momentum of the ball game. And when you're going up against an elite defense like the LA Chargers, who are one of the top 10 defenses in the league that is giving up the fewest points in football, then I really don't know how much of a shot you're going to have unless Joe Burrow decides to have a perfect passer rating and unless the Cincinnati Bengals defense finally tightens the heck up. So I think the Chargers will win. They're at home. They have a way better defense. I think Justin Herbert is set up for a great game against one of the worst passing defenses and one of the worst scoring units in the league. Chargers win 35-30. I think it'll be really great. I think it'll be a great game, and because we know Joe Burrow is going to do whatever it takes to win. But like I said, there's always that one drive or that one play that will flip everything upside down. With that being said, let's go to Monday Night Football. Both teams in Texas are in dire straits right now. The Texans at least have a winning record and are on top of their division, but offensively, they're limited. Defensively, they don't give up a lot of yards, but they give up a lot of points. And they just blew a 16-point lead at halftime to the Detroit Lions after their defense intercepted Jared Goff 5 times. In the second half alone, they got outscored 19-0. C.J. Stroud threw 2 interceptions on his first 2 drives of the period. They couldn't get on the board. They missed the 58-yard field goal that would have given them the lead with just under a minute remaining. And, I mean, the defense gave up 2 knuckle field goals by Jake Bates to decide the football game. The Dallas Cowboys, on the other hand, they're just dead. I mean, Cooper Rush couldn't even throw for 50 yards on 13 completions. Trey Lance had 26 yards with a pick. Their offense was anemic. They they turned the ball over 5 times. The defense gave up over 180 yards to the Philadelphia Eagles. And even though Micah Parsons had a great welcome back game with a couple sacks, even though the Cowboys defense did what they could in the first half with 5 quarterback takedowns and 2 turnovers, they completely fell apart after halftime. They gave up 34 points. And even Micah Parsons just had enough. He threw his head coach under the bus, saying that instead of feeling bad for Mike McCarthy, he feels bad for guys like Zach Martin because they put in more work than Mike McCarthy ever did, which means Mike McCarthy's completely lost the locker room. Jerry Jones feels like he's doing nothing wrong, yet he's stubborn and delusional into thinking that everything is fine and that he doesn't really need to do anything because as long as you don't do anything in free agency and invest in the draft, you're going to be fine, even though you don't have any quality weapons on your offense besides CeeDee Lamb. Your defense is flat out trash that has terrible personnel and terrible coaching. And your head coach's career is pretty much on the line here. So Monday Night Football is going to be a snooze fest. I think the Texans will win because I have a lot more faith in C.J. Stroud than I ever do with Cooper Rush. For whatever reason, I think it's actually going to be a lower scoring of a game, which means I actually think that the Dallas Cowboys could pull off an upset here. But actually, now that I think about it, Nico Collins, we don't know what his status is going to be. They said he was clear to return to practice last week, but he didn't play against Detroit because of the hamstring injury. You're already without Stephon Diggs. The running game works because the running game didn't have a great game last week when they played against Detroit. But normally Joe Mixon has had a solid season, and the Cowboys can't do anything against the run. But at the same time, Houston's offense has barely escaped a lot of wins, and the Cowboys, somehow, some way, can pull off, even the most surprising of victories. So you know what? I'll pick the Cowboys here, and I'm gonna be wrong, most likely. I have a lot more faith in C.J. Stroud than I do with Cooper Rush, but at the same time, it's just I don't know how if the Cowboys somehow fall to 3-7, then I'll just throw my hands up and say that their season is officially over. But listen, I don't know if they're going to be done just yet. So give me the Cowboys 20-16. And I'm probably going to be on freezing cold takes because of this. Like I said, Texas offense has been struggling. Cowboys defense hasn't been great themselves, but I mean, I feel like their personnel can match up really well against Houston's offense. And more importantly, I think their offense can come up with a few flash plays to escape with a low-scoring grudge match. To escape in a low-scoring grudge match, I should say. And with that being said, we're going to end the show there. Thank you so much for tuning in. All the picks have been locked. Make sure you like and subscribe for additional content. Leave a comment down below. Who do you think will win this game? Who do you think is going to win this week? And how did your team perform throughout the week? There were a couple things that I wanted to get into. Diamador Lenore signed a 5-year, $92 million contract extension with the San Francisco 49ers. He's been their top corner. He's actually had a fantastic season. He's given up a 66 passer rating as the nearest defender, and he's proven to be a vital piece to this defense. I don't know if I would have given it to him too soon because you have to worry about how much money you're going to give Brock Purdy for the long term. But I think Diamador Lenore deserved a big payday. He's been absolutely fantastic this year, and he was going to be an unrestricted free agent heading into the next offseason. So you know what? I don't have too many problems with it. It was just the timing of it would have been a lot better. And also, $18.4 million per year for 5 years, it could be a little steep if it doesn't pan out, especially with all the guys that you have to pay for with Nick Bosa and Debo and Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle, Trent Williams. The list goes on and on and on. You get my drift. But, yeah. Have a great rest of your week, everybody. We'll see you next time. And love y'all. Peace.